Here's another game that I played against Rybka 2.3.2 AMP. I was black and the game was Cecilia Nydorf. So let's take a look. E4, C5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop g5, e6 and f4. Sometimes I play the, well, in passing I can also mention a little bit about the opening. I play sometimes the poison pawn variation where, for example, queen b6, queen d2, and black has the choice to either take the pawn on b2 or just play knight c6 and ignore taking the pawn. Taking the pawn on b2, although white loses a pawn, but he does get some compensation for that pawn. He gets initiative, and at the end of a very long variation, white will usually have at least three open files, usually the f file, the d file, as well as the b file. Of course, it wouldn't have the b file if black wouldn't take the pawn, but of course that's the idea of the variation. And it's, well, to say the least, very difficult for black to escape the checks and of course the threats all over the place. But of course in the variation where I mentioned the three open files, white will usually sacrifice the knight for a pawn, and that's usually what happens in that particular variation. So anyway, instead of that I play bishop e7, queen f3, queen c7. I believe that this setup is probably more common than the poison pawn variation. So black probably avoids that. But again, of course, it's not necessary for black to actually take the pawn, but just to sort of sidestep that pin instead of playing bishop e7. It simply depends on how black, or who plays black, and his favorite variation or whatever. Long, and here white castles long, knight b to d7, bishop d3, b5, and black launches a sort of attack on the queen side over here, but it's not really a problem for white in any way. e5, bishop b7, queen h3. Of course it doesn't work to take the pawn because, as you can see, black will simply take the queen, and when white takes back, then the rook falls and so on. So it doesn't work. So queen h3, d takes e5, f takes e5, queen takes e5, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, rook h to e1. So we can see that white sacrificed a pawn for the to gain some sort of initiative or an attack. Of course, usually the Sicilian, the e6 pawn is weak anyway, and here of course you can see that there are three pieces attacking: the knight, the queen, and the rook. Queen c5. Of course, I can't take the knight on d4 because then after bishop b5 check, there's a discovery on my queen, and after a takes b, rook takes d, and black is down a queen for a piece. It's just too much. Well, actually two pieces, two light pieces, the bishop and the knight, but that's just too much. So queen c5, knight e4, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, and castles. And this is, as far as I can see, a completely equal game. White has nothing to attack on the king side, and of course nothing on the queen side, and the rook can't come to h4 because then I would just take the rook with the bishop. Queen f3, bishop f6, c3, a5. This gave me just a small chance to start attacking. Of course, as you can see, it's much easier for black to attack white than it is for white to attack black. Rook g4, of course, with the threat taking the bishop on f6, so just move it away to h8. Knight b3, queen c7, king b1, avoiding, of course, the move. You know, the threat's pretty much all over the place, so that was a good defensive move. b4, I'm sacrificing a pawn here for some sort of attack. C takes b4, a takes b4, rook takes b4, and now both sides have 4 pawns. Of course, this was a sacrifice, like I said. Rook a to b8, rook takes b8, rook takes b8, g3, defending the pawn. Queen e5, threatening checkmate on b2, rook d2, and here, and since this was a 3+1 minute blitz game, I couldn't really see anything else but to draw the game. Queen e1, and the moves, and we repeated 3 times, and the game ended in a draw. I don't. There was no way to actually find any other moves. Maybe the bishop is stronger than, of course the bishop is stronger than the knight, but I didn't want to take any chance, so I just decided to draw the game. So let's take a quick look again at the opening here. e4, c5, knight f3, d6, e4, c6, d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, a6, bishop g5, e6, f4, bishop e7, and again queen b6 is an alternative. Queen f3, queen c7, castles long, knight b to d7, bishop d3, b5, e5, bishop e7, queen h3, d takes e5, f takes e5, queen takes e5, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, rook h, d1. So, okay, it was a pretty fast, short game, just 32 moves, but it was against Rybka, and I really respect that engine. Of course, I respect many other engines as well, but I believe that Rybka has become very popular, and because it's simply very strong. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this, and see you soon. Bye.